Conozco bien ese palo, porque palo bueno es. Siete rayos, palo bueno. Tumba palo cucuyé. Muy bueno para hacer la NASA. Muy bueno nacer, lo pensé. Tumba palo cucuyé. El cucuyé, el cucuyé, el cucuyé, el cucuyé. Tumba palo cucuyé. El cucuyé.
Greetings, hello, welcome. We hope that everyone is well on this day, and we are glad that you have decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Thank you for joining us. And today's important topic, we have done a previous program, I believe a year ago, commemorating Sister Assata Shakur's escape from the dungeon cells of imperialist United Snakes. But today's program is a little different because we are going to talk about some of the details of how she got out of prison, but we are also going to frame that in the context of what is Assata Shakur's everlasting legacy. What is her legacy going to be 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now? We all know that she made her physical transition on September 25th of this year. So we want to talk about the importance of her valuable legacy. So thank you for joining us for that conversation that we're going to have today. Conversation starter. And we want to, of course, start as always. We acknowledge the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I see a lot of very positive action taking place, and so happy to see that. I know that our comrade friends in Oregon are planning a big event for them in January up there in the Corvallis area, and we are very excited to see them do that. I saw that our comrades in La Raza Unida had a very positive event yesterday, highlighting the contributions of people in Delano, which is part of the agricultural community here in the San Joaquin Valley, where all the food you eat is grown, where they had a wonderful event acknowledging the indigenous and Filipino community that contributed to worker rights for folks in that region. So just glad to see all of these wonderful activities of resistance from the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So happy to see that. And of course, our African ancestors, when we talk about Assata now, we're talking about one of our newest ancestors and her contribution. And it's a fitting topic to talk about what her legacy is, like how people, what is the importance of what happened in her life, and why do we talk about people like her so long after they made their physical transition? This is important to consider because there are all these people who have been physically transitioned for years, sometimes decades, sometimes even centuries, and they still play a critical role in our inspiration. And so we want to talk about, as it relates to Sister Asata, the reasons we believe why that is. And also saw a number of events, some wonderful people in the Dallas, Texas area who have the Pan African Connection bookstore. They posted a wonderful collage of events happening around the world today commemorating Assata Shakur and her November 2nd, 1979 uh, liberation from prison. And there must have been at least 10 events, including this one we're doing right now. So we definitely thank our family there in the Dallas area for helping folks understand the importance of commemorating our sister, not just because of her as an individual, but again, talking about her legacy, her impact, her inspiration on all of us. That's why it's so important. So we're glad that you're here for this. And we start as we always do, just by acknowledging, for those that may not know, our Ancestors' Voices. This program is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, for short, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan African political party based in Africa. And our objective is Pan Africanism, correctly defined as one unified socialist Africa. And someone asked me yesterday, how have you been able to stay in the party so long, working as hard as you do? And I told them that we are like everything else on this planet Earth, far from perfect. We have our contradictions, and they are louder sometimes than other times. But at the same time, I understand why I'm here. And I'm here because I want to see Africa united. I want to see African people united, and I want Africa to be at the center of that. And I've wanted that since I was 17 years old, which was the first time I saw the importance of that objective. And so here today, going on 64 years old, I want it more now than I ever have, because I know that that is really what we need as a people to help us move out of this pit that we've been in for the last 500 plus years and move into our own ability to determine our own destiny. And so I want that. And thus far in my life, from everything I've seen, the AAPRP is the organization that is doing the most to move us in that position to achieve that objective. And that's what I told the person yesterday. That's the reason why I'm still here. And while I'll continue to be here, there's a lot of really wonderful work out here. There's people feeding people, there's people educating people, there's people organizing training for us to defend ourselves, and I'm involved in all of that work. But at the same time, the one thing I don't see is who is working all over the world to unite our people and get us on the same page. Because for me, as I mentioned, for the overwhelming majority of my life, that is what I've seen as the thing that we need, that's really going to get us where we need to go. And I see us as a party, as bad as we are, as raggedy as we are doing that work. That work is happening. It is building. It is getting stronger. And so that's the reason why I'm here. And so that's what we mean when we say Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. We mean creating the objective conditions that give us the power to determine our own forward progress, where we don't need anyone else. If other people want to walk with us side by side, we want to do that. We are human beings. We don't struggle in isolation. But if anyone wants to see us as an obstacle to the forward progress of this world and wants to do things to prevent us from reaching our destiny, Pan-Africanism is what gives us the power to move forward, whether they like it or not. And so that's why, for me, that is the objective, and that's why, for me, this organization is the one that is best positioned to move us forward in that direction. And so our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, of course, is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And again, everything that we're doing is focused around that strategy that Nkrumah laid out. And again, I haven't seen anyone else doing that. And I believe that that strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism that Nkrumah lays out in his book is the appropriate strategy and the correct strategy to bring us towards Pan-Africanism. So, I'm driven by the mission and the ideas. I'm not driven by the individuals and the people. I'm driven by the mission and the ideas. No people are going to guide me to do what I know and feel needs to happen. And by the same result, no individuals, no people are going to derail me from fighting to achieve that mission. It's the mission. It's the ideas. And that's why those ideas guide me in terms of just not doing political quote unquote work, but also how I treat people when I go in a restaurant, how I treat people on the street. These values, these ideologically based values determine my life, and nothing is going to derail me from doing that. And I might stop breathing in 2 minutes. I might stop breathing in 30 years. I don't know, and don't really care, to be honest with you, because whatever time I have, it's essential to me to continue to do this work. And so this program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is hosted by myself and the newly anointed daughter that of mine, Dr. Shakur Umi. We do it every week. We invite you to let people know if you haven't been doing that. Some of you have, and it's very much appreciated, because this is how we spread the word about this work. So thank you very much. I went onto my website this morning, and I always have a lot of people that go to that page, um, you know, upwards of 1,000 people a month. But today, I had 4 times that many people. And I don't know why they're there, but all I can do is just continue to do the work as best as I can, and continue to struggle to build this organization. I'm like everyone else. I'm tired. I want to have fun, and I do the best that I can to have fun. I would argue I probably have more fun than those of you out there that prioritize and do nothing else except have fun and take care of yourself. I probably, because I appreciate it more, because I understand it within the context of what it means to take care of yourself, and that struggling for justice is really a part of that process, because you can't really be taking care of yourself when you don't do anything to address the conditions in a backward, oppressive society. What You're not taking care of yourself. What you're doing is numbing yourself to the conditions. So I don't do that. I'm out here dealing with the reality of the world to the best of my ability, and I sleep well doing that. Some nights I don't sleep well because I have ideas, or there are things that I want to do that I haven't done yet. But we will continue. That's the message, and that's really what this program today is about: is going to the right sources for inspiration and legacy. And Assata Shakur is without question one of those right places. So to get us started on this topic, what is the endearing legacy of Sister Assata Shakur? I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Okay, I'm waiting for this video to cut on, but thank you all so much. I hope you all are well. So I just want to start off by saying that this book that you hopefully see on the screen, it's a life-changing book. And I think that if you identify as an African person, if you identify as an African woman, if you have any information about Assata Shakur, or if you want information about Assata before this, legendary person who passed away on Cuban grounds, like, you should read this book, you all. You should read this. And I especially think that if you have any ties to Africa, if you have any issues with your identity, you're trying to establish who you are as an African person, this is one of the top books that should be read. Because I guarantee you, you're not going to be able to really understand and dissect everything that she has said on the first read. I'm not saying that because it's a shot at your intelligence level. I'm saying it because there are things that you need to process by reading this book, and you're not really going to be able to process everything at the same time. You're going to need to read this book over time, and I think that's why I appreciate her so much, because she kept it real in this book. She talked about the contradictions. She highlighted the different things that African people, African women face on a day-to-day basis. She talked about how she didn't understand how, people were supposed to really appreciate being able to just be free and to relax during intimate moments with their partners, if they were so worried about, if their hair was fried or if their hair was permed in some way, and so worried about it sweating out. And she would just describe how she would grow up in the mid South in the summertime in those southern heated states, and how hot it would get. And she didn't understand why more Africans, but also African women, just didn't have natural hair. But she also talked about the contradictions of that. She talked about the beauty standards. She talked about the white supremacy. I mean, this is such an affirming book, you all. And we can even kind of think back to like what the background was in terms of where Assata really started getting a lot of the gist to even write this book. So we understand that she was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware, within the U.S. colony, and her former colonized name was Joanne Chesimard, and she joined the Black Panther Party chapter very early in her life. And contrary to popular belief, Sister Assata was not within leadership within the party. That was national or even state Black Panther status. There was no leadership position held for her, even though a lot of people will communicate that and will dispute that and display it. She did indicate in her biography that she became the target of the FBI's counterintelligence program. And due to that, she went into creating an underground, which was emerged as the Black Liberation Army. And again, like, this is one of those reads, you all, where you're not going to take everything in at one time, but we definitely would encourage you to read some of it, watch this seminar again in a couple of weeks after you've had time to process, and then continue to read the rest of the book. Or read some of it, read more of it, and then watch this seminar. But I guarantee you things are going to be clicking and setting in, and you're going to be processing things a lot differently. And you're going to be like, whoa, that's what she meant when she said that. And it's just going to make so much sense and be so satisfying. So satisfying. So satisfying. So we definitely think that it's a good read for you. And more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to continue to develop your own analysis of what it means to have the kind of roles and the different organizational priorities or participation that Assata interacted with throughout her life. You know, we always talk in this seminar about the importance of joining an organization that is working for justice. And we always say, you know, even if you decide you don't want to join our organization, we are okay with that. We are not set tripping. We don't expect you to just join us or to not, you know, be consistent or a contributing factor for others. We just ask that you join some organization, any organization actually, that is working for justice. And Assata is no different than that. You know, the different organizations that she laid out between the Black Liberation Army and even her role with the Panthers, these are great examples of how we can see the importance of being in an organization that is working for justice. At this point, we should all agree that being in an organization strongly contributes to molding and developing the kind of person that you will become. It will influence what you think about. It will influence how you think about things. It will influence you to dig deeper and to investigate more, to understand that you are missing information. You will develop a much more level of humility when you are in an organization that is working for justice. Because you will understand that the work that you're doing, although it is helping and improving to make the world better, you will begin to understand very quickly that this is so much bigger than you as an individual. This is so much bigger than your family. This is so much bigger than the people in your community or on your block. There are thousands of people every single day who are impacted by the lack of work that needs to be done. And you start to really dig into that, and you start to feel proud that you are a part of the solution, not contributing to the problem, which is why the humility continues to develop, because you have no choice but to be humble. You are excited that you were a part of the reason that these problems are getting resolved, but you also are seeing that a lot of these problems still exist in other parts of the world. So we have our work cut out for us. And this is why it's so important to pick up pebbles and to pick up wisdom from other comrades such as Assata, because then you're in a position where you can, you know, learn from the struggles that she went through. You can learn from how she dealt with feeling her burnt out. You can learn from how she dealt with feeling her fatigue and all of the, you know, the different contradictions that she talks about. Also, what it meant for her to be tracked and targeted and attacked and chased and pursued by the FBI, like what that world really looks like in terms of someone who's on the caliber that she is, to be able to really understand why all of this is worth it. We have to ask ourselves, like, what was the motivation behind any of this? What made her get out of bed and do this work, knowing that her life was going to be under search and seizure? She still had to make a choice, and she still decided to choose the people at the end of the day. That has to stand for something, you all. And again, Assata understood that this was bigger than her. I would like to think that she understood that because of her role within the Panthers. I would like to think that she understood that because of her role within the Black Liberation Army. I would also like to think that she coupled her experiences with helping to understand that. So your experiences are valid. Next slide, please. But that's not enough. It's not enough. This is why we encourage you to join some organization that's working for justice. If you're not going to join an organization, we encourage you to start an organization. If you're not ready to start one, we encourage you to support a Pan-Africanist organization that is working for justice, because we need support where you can, you know, print off propaganda. Maybe you can give us your paper and your ink. We need support where you can help build different programs so that we can have agendas laid out and have somebody who is making the program outlay of what the event is going to look like. We need people to help us blitz and to promote and to advertise for these programs and events. We need people to help with donations, because a lot of times we need to give honorariums to our speakers. The Zoom accounts that we have to host these seminars, to host the international meetings, the committee meetings, all of that costs money. You know, like there's a lot of ways that we can ask for your support, you all. So we hope that you will join an organization that's working for justice. But if not, maybe you can just take a page, quite literally, out of Assata's book and just start from where she was and continue to develop yourself just as she has, in terms of continuing to be the ancestor that she is, because her work is not done. Every time that we choose to say her name, we are still acknowledging her legacy that she has left for us. And you know what? She is not done, and she doesn't expect us to be done, you all. She is not done, and she does not expect us to be done. She is still impacting us. She is still influencing us. She is still fighting for us. There are people right now on this call who don't know anything about Assata Shakur, and they are learning today who this person is. And hopefully, if they are hungry enough for knowledge, they will continue to investigate more, and they will learn more about her as time goes on and progresses. Speaking of her legacy, on May 2nd, 1973, two New Jersey state troopers pulled over a car on the turnpike that was occupied by Sister Assata Shakur, Zaid Shakur, and Sudiata Akoli, excuse me. A shootout occurred, and Comrade Zaid Shakur was killed. The trooper named Forrester was also killed. Assata was injured in a way that, according to the medical examiner's report, served as testimony at her trial and made it impossible for her to have fired a gun and caused Forrester's injuries. Although the jurors in her trial were encouraged off the record to disregard the testimony. So I'm going to say that again because it's really important, especially when we know that we live in a world that is not just. We are literally trying to make this argument today that our comrade Assata, who was convicted of murdering a state trooper, literally acknowledged that there was an injury that prevented her from being able to fire the weapon. We just have to think about that, you all. But this is the same system that does not use logic because it's too embedded with colonial, racist, patriarchal, heterosexual bias, right? So if she's injured and she can't fire a gun, then these are the things to think about. And that's why the testimony was shared with the jury, but the jury was also encouraged to dispute and to ignore that testimony because, as we know, there was already the pursuit to lock first and ask questions later, right? Lock up first and ask questions later, or in this case, lock up with no potential for a what is it, like a when you get like not a discount, goodness, my brain, where you get like a good behavior, reduced sentence, that's what it's called. There was nothing like that. Nothing like that. Thank you, comrade, on Zoom. Yes, I'm doing my best here. Yes. So yeah, there was nothing like that. It was already set in motion because that was the objective, was to continue locking our people up, right? Catch them and lock them up, catch them and lock them up. It reminds me of slave catchers back in the day, if you see the connection with that. So this is kind of how we look at that, where we know that this comrade was injured and couldn't fire the weapon, especially that would cause the kind of injuries that the trooper had. But yet they were still encouraged as jury members to ignore that, and to only look at the evidence, quote unquote. And that's very strong, facetious air quotes there. All right, so because of that, Assata was incarcerated for most of her time in prison in the Clinton Correctional Facility in New York, and that was until November of 1979. 1979. And we can continue to think about how much time has passed. We can continue to think about how a lot of our political prisoners are wrongfully accused, those that are still with us, as well as those who passed, because we were never able to get them the justice that they deserved. And so again, like, this is why this work is so important, you all. And more importantly, excuse me, this is why we have to know the truth. This is why we have to do the research. This is why we can't rely on the capitalist media to tell us about what's happening, because we know that they're going to keep information from us. They're going to withhold information. They're going to paint only one side of the picture. We have to take it upon ourselves to assume at this point that whatever's being presented to us is probably not trustworthy. And so because of that, we should probably go in a different direction in terms of thinking about things and understanding things a little bit differently. As I prepare to give the floor back to Baba Ajamu, I'll just say really quickly that I just talked about this in my work study circle yesterday when we met. And one of the comrades made an argument about just overall how Africans are making a comparison that Charlie Clerk was like, our Martin Luther King. And when the comrade finished speaking, I said, yeah, I've been hearing a lot of that rhetoric too. And I think that's something we need to be, more aware of as Pan-Africanists, and shut it down and to articulate, the nonsense behind that and whatnot. But then I said to the circle, I said, but what's crazy is I didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was. And then, like, all of a sudden his murder was like everywhere. And I was like, who is this cat? Like, I don't even know who this is. And I told the circle, I said, but it didn't matter. I knew that this person was in support of the US imperialist country. And that's all I needed to know. So therefore, I know that I don't agree with anything this person is putting out, what they're spewing out, what they're disputing, what they're displaying. That's all I need to know, is if you are for the country that I am no longer ever supporting and not interested in supporting, then we're at a combat. We're at a standstill, and like, this is how we have to kind of think about that. So again, like, we should all be taking that kind of frame when we think about things. Like, if these things are being presented to us in a way that we should be trusting them and we should be following them, but we know that their well-being is to support this country that has benefited from colonization, from land theft, from genocide, from unconstituted sexual exploitation. Like, we should know at this point, you all, this cannot be trusted. We should know that war occurs because America has bullied its way. We should know that resources are stolen, land, people have been stolen, so that America can get what it wants, and Europe as well can get what it wants, right? Israel, like, these are all connected. We have to start to understand and just make these assumptions, you all. That should just be the basis of what we're doing at this point. And then from there, the political education can actually begin. But if we're not being honest with ourselves, then we're just being liberal. And if we're being liberal, then we just literally are doing the master's work for them, where we can't even acknowledge and be honest about the fact that this is shady and it's not right and it's unethical and it needs to be called out. We need to name it and we need to call it. As awkward as that is, it's more awkward if we choose to say nothing and we remain silent, because then we're still contributing to being a part of the problem. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a part of the problem. I'm trying very hard to be a part of the solution, just like Baba Ajamu said earlier today. So with that, we encourage you to join an organization that's working for justice. And if nothing else, maybe you can join the Assata Shakur, I want to learn more about her legacy organization, or maybe you can start it yourself. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, asante sana, midasi. Yeah, Charlie Kirk is just the latest, just the Ku Klux Klan in a tweed sweater. That's all it is. And the people who advocate that, and I see many of these popcorn coons on social media and graham crackers and crackers saying that. But the thing that we are constantly reiterating to you all, that, hopefully this example can help bring home for you, is when you're actually on the ground doing the work, this is the qualification that helps you see through those stupid ass type arguments. Because myself, I knew who Charlie Kirk was. And the reason why I did is because on multiple occasions, when he appeared at colleges and universities in this region, I was called to go out and defend people who just wanted to protest and stand up for their rights to be human beings in the face of his anti-human rhetoric. And I did that a number of times, for a number of years, did that. And put my body on the line defending people. So when you're doing that level of work, you're going to know what the contradictions are. And you're not going to be in a position where you're confused by some flowery sounding rhetoric because you don't have any actual experience to dissect that rhetoric and break it down in concrete terms. So, this is why we constantly harp on this. You've got to get involved. You can't just listen to people and think you have an analysis of what's going on in the world. That is never going to be true. You have to participate in this struggle. And so, we should just reiterate the terms in which our sister was liberated. And on the screen, I have some of the people who played a role in helping Assata Shakur get out of prison. And there were other people that are not on here, but we should acknowledge, of course, Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga, who I had the honor of meeting 6, 7 years ago before he made his physical transition. He was the leader of the effort to liberate Sister Assata. And of course, Brother Matulu Shakur, who was also have made his physical transition. And, both of them, all of these folks spent a lot of years in prison. But Matulu, along with Marilyn Buck, the European woman in the lower left, they were convicted for, along with Sekou. Sekou was mostly convicted for the Brinks truck robberies, which you should look that up if you don't know about that. But Matulu and Marilyn were explicitly convicted for helping Assata escape and spent 30 plus years in prison. And then we have our sister Nehanda Abadan, who also played a critical role in helping. And like I said, there were other people. All of these folks on the screen have now made their physical transition. They're all now ancestors, but we honor them because one of the legacies that we need to be aware of is the level of organization that was involved in carrying out the escape for Sister Assata, right? And this all came within the context of this period between 1971 and 1973, where the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, launched a terrorist campaign to annihilate anybody affiliated with the Black Liberation Army. Now, I had two reliable sources, Shakura. One was Assata when I met her and we spent time in Cuba 30 plus years ago. And another was Brother Geronimo Gijago, or Geronimo Pratt was his former slave name, who spent 27 years in prison. Both of them told me that, because I was under the erroneous assumption, and a lot of people probably still are, that the Black Liberation Army emerged when the FBI drove the Black Panther Party underground. And both of them made the point to me that that was not true, that there always was an underground. And Geronimo talked about how his role in the LA Black Panther Party branch was to help facilitate that underground, and that he participated in that in 1968. That was before Assata even joined the Black Panther Party in New York. And so I think, obviously those are two highly credible people. And even in her autobiography, Assata talks about how she connected with people to go underground. Like, she didn't do that on her own. So, that was there. That was something our people were organizing. And during this period of the early 70s, during this campaign, the FBI was on a mission to destroy the Black Liberation Army. The Black Liberation Army was a revolutionary organization, so they were an army, as their title said, and they were engaged in work to appropriate money through the robbing the Brinks trucks, robbing banks, and we don't see those as crimes. And the BLA actually submitted documents to the World Court indicating that we are prisoners of war in this backward ass country, and we have a right to fight for our liberation, no different than any other country that fights for its national liberation. And that was their argument, and it was a correct argument. whether you understand it or agree with it or not is irrelevant. It was a correct argument. And so they engaged in those activities that were designed to bring resources into the African liberation movement. And because of this, the FBI targeted them. And the FBI documents, which I've studied in great detail, and you should do the same, talked about in 1973, there was a young African who's working with the Black Liberation Army called Twyman Myers. I've mentioned him multiple times because most people don't know who he is. Twyman was 21 years old in 1973, and he was a former knucklehead in New York City, and he was politicized by the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. And because he had engaged in violence within our community, it was easy for him to make that transition to engaging in violence that was designed around the liberation of African people. And this part right there, what I just said, is what this backward ass government is most afraid of. That's what they're most afraid. Twyman Myers represented the thing that they're most afraid of. Any of our people who decide that I'm no longer going to commit acts of violence and sabotage within my communities, I'm going to direct all of that against the state. And having experience doing that, I'm not going to have any fear or hesitation in doing so. So, this is why in 1973 in Brooklyn, FBI agents saw Twyman Myers walking on the street. He had been underground as well. And they had gotten a tip that he was in an apartment complex in Brooklyn. And they saw him come out of the apartment complex and walk down the street. And they didn't try to arrest him, they just machine gunned him down, riddled his body with bullets a number of times. And they did this in front of anyone who, if you've ever been to Brooklyn, the streets are packed with people. They did this in front of the entire African community. Again, their message to us is if you stand up to us, this is what will happen to you. And I'm saying all this because this was the environment in which the folks who were still engaged in the Black Liberation Army decided that we need to do something decisive. The appropriations are great, but we don't know if we're winning the propaganda battle around those. We're gaining resources for the African liberation struggle, but our enemies are portraying us as bank robbers and criminals who are taking the money for ourselves. So we don't know if that's going to be enough to win the narrative. And understanding that propaganda is a critical part of politically educating the population, they came up with the idea of liberating an African freedom fighter who had been incarcerated. And they immediately came to that being Sister Assata Shakur. And once that was decided, Brother Sekou and the others, they reached out to Assata in the prison facility in New York where she was incarcerated. And they were able to, in a clandestine way, inform her of their plan and to ask her if she was interested in participating. And she was able to communicate back to them, yes. And so they began to strategize. They took 9 or 10 months. They didn't just go haphazard into the prison like a lot of you would do. They had a 9-month plan and they practiced, you all. This is very important because people are so egotistical that you think that because you think something in your head, you're going to be able to do it in material reality. And it doesn't work like that. You have to practice and train yourself to do this work. And so that's what they did. And they did that all the way down to driving a van into the prison and driving it up to the point where they felt that they would have the best possibility of getting to Assata and carrying her out of the prison. And they did that multiple times without being stopped. And by doing that, they were able, this is why practice is so important, because they were able to identify the weak spots in the prison, the blind spots. They were able to identify where the checkpoints were, how serious the people at the checkpoints were in terms of checking you. They were able to make proper assessments on all of that. And so after several practice runs, they knew that they were ready. And anyone that, talks to anybody in the movement and knows anything about Sekou Odinga, you know that he was a highly disciplined soldier. He was a highly disciplined soldier, and he demanded that people practice and that they be prepared to carry out their parts. He didn't smoke, he didn't get high, he didn't drink, he didn't do any of that. He was totally focused on making sure that people were prepared to carry out their responsibilities. And that was when the European women approached him, understanding through reliable movement circles that this plan might be trusted circles, that this plan might be in action. They approached him, and Marilyn Buck approached him. And she was also, like Sundiata, someone I met and developed a very close relationship because she was incarcerated just down the road here for a number of years. And I used to visit her, as I mentioned many times, all the time, and used to take Shakur with me. So Shakur got a chance to meet Comrade Marilyn Buck and talk to her in person. But she told me one of those times that she went to Sundiata, met him, and asked how she could help, and that he drilled her relentlessly. She was underground at that time. She had escaped prison in 1985. She was arrested on some charges related to her work within the Weather Underground, who she was involved with. If you don't know who they are, you should investigate that. And she had escaped prison, and so she was out trying to look for a role to play. And she approached him, and they were not initially keen on having, European women helping them, but she was apparently able to convince them that they could use her to do bait and switch. And the other woman who participated as well, the other European woman who participated. And so they were able to do that. And they were able to do that because they felt that if they could successfully get Assata out of prison, that would send such a positive reverberation throughout the world, because the US is portrayed as indefeatable, invincible. You can't do anything to go up against the US unless you plan to lose. And I just explained to you their strategy that they displayed against the movement, where they shot down young Twyman Myers in the street. They shot Fred Hampton, killed him, and dragged his body out into the street. They had a shootout with the LA Black Panther Party chapter on Central Avenue in Los Angeles and marched everybody out naked. Their whole strategy was, if you stand up against us, assassinated Malcolm X in front of his followers at the Audubon Ballroom. If you stand up against us, this is what will happen to you. That's their message. So the BLA comrades wanted to break that vision of America down by saying, no, we can defeat America. We can liberate our sister right under their noses. We can do something that they can do nothing to stop us from doing. And that was their motivation for carrying out the escape of Sister Assata Shakur. It's very important to say that, because a lot of you see this as just an individual thing of well, it was just about Assata, the individual. No, of course she was important to our movement, absolutely important. No question about that. But all of us are important. And she would be the first to tell you that. All of us are important, because it's the masses of people who make history, not individuals. And so if it wasn't Assata that was busted out of prison on November 2nd, 1979, it would have been someone else to create the narrative that we can defeat US imperialism. We weren't ready to wage a revolution in 1979. We're not ready to wage a revolutionary war right now. But these types of acts can inspire us to understand that victory is ours if we organize properly to achieve it. And I'm saying that because a lot of you don't believe victory is possible. And you demonstrate you don't believe it by your inaction. Because if you really believed it, you couldn't be as inactive as you are. Those of us that are active is because we believe victory is possible. Those of you that are inactive, or those of you that are semi-active or inconsistently active, that's because you don't really believe it's possible. You can tell yourself whatever the hell you want to tell yourself for why you do the things you do or don't do that you should do. But the reason at the end of the day is because you don't really believe that it's going to be fruitful to engage in that work. And so they wanted to do this act as a way to try to inspire us to believe that victory is possible, right? So, it's important, especially since, we don't study in this society. So people know very little about the Cuban Revolution. They only know what the enemies of the Cuban Revolution want them to know about it. And because of that, it'd be difficult. Like I talked to someone the other day, and they told me, there's someone from the Middle East, and they told me, well, what do you know about Gaddafi? And I said, I know a significant amount about Gaddafi in Libya, in the Jamahiriya. And they said, well, I heard he was a dictator. And I said, but you just came to me to ask about him. So are you going to tell me propaganda that somebody filled your head with? Or are you really interested in getting some sources to understand what the Libyan Jamahiriya was really about? And the person really didn't want any information. They just wanted, I guess, a validation of their backward ass ideas. Well, they came to the wrong people to get that. And they left frustrated, and I left totally satisfied that I had shut them down the way I did, because you should be shut down when you come with that kind of backwardness. So, we don't know much about the Cuban Revolution. So, because of that, for a lot of folks, it's going to be difficult for them to ever understand, why did Assata go to Cuba? I've had people say that to me for years. Why did she go there? Well, where should she have gone? Should she have gone to San Francisco? Should she have gone to London, England, or Paris, France? Clearly, if she had gone to any of those places and surfaced, she would have been arrested the next day and put back in a U.S. penitentiary. There was one place on earth where she could be most adequately protected. And that, my friends and enemies, was and still is today the Cuban Revolution, the socialist Cuban Revolution. And so she arrived there understanding that Cuba has a history of supporting African liberation, a long history. Even though the revolution is only 66 years old, they still have all of that period wrapped up in strong support for the African liberation, not just here in the United States of America, but particularly in Africa. In Africa, they have that history. And Asada and the Black Liberation Army comrades that history was not unknown to them. They were very well aware of that history. And so when they made that decision to go to Cuba, it was rooted in a logic of going the safest place that could exist for her, and a place where African liberation struggle has always been respected. Always been respected. And we've talked about this a ton of times, so I'll just say it quickly, that when we say that, we're talking about the history of the Cuban Revolution. We're talking about Ernesto Che Guevara going to the Congo himself and leading 100 Africans from Cuba to fight in support of the National Congolese movement in the Congo in 1964, who were fighting against US backed imperialism and neocolonialism in the Congo after they assassinated Patrice Emery Lumumba 3 short years before that, and fighting there for several months and not being successful. And Comrade Che going to the Tanzanian Cuban embassy in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and spending several months there making contacts. I've been to the Cuban embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The ambassador there showed me where Che Guevara lived when he was there several months. So I'm not talking about something that somebody told me. Okay. I saw where Che slept. I saw where he studied. I saw the phone he used to call African revolutionaries and build up those contacts that led to the creation of Cuba's military assistance in Africa, led by comrade brother Victor Drake Cruz, who moved to Africa and helped facilitate Cuban military support for the PAIGC struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau, for the popular movement for the liberation of Angola's anti-colonial war in Angola, for Frelimo's anti-colonial war against Portugal in Mozambique, for Namibia's struggle against Germany in through the Southwest African People's Organization, etc., for the liberation movements in Azania, South Africa, that were fighting against apartheid in that country. Those contacts were made, and this led to Cuba sending 500,000 troops to Africa to fight against racist apartheid in the late 80s and early 1990s. All of that military operation facilitated by Comrade Fidel Castro in Cuba. So you can't tell us a goddamn thing about Fidel and Che. We're not trying to shut the hell up. Go to hell, in fact. Those are our comrades and our people. And we love Fidel and we love Che. And I love saying that because it upsets people so much. We love Fidel and we love Che. And we always have and we always will. And that's why, you all, that they also help facilitate safe conditions for African revolutionaries. They did it for Robert Williams when he was NAACP president, and he protected the white couple in North Carolina in 1957 because of the urban rebellion there. And the mistake that he made in the eyes of imperialism is he had urged Africans to arm themselves against white supremacists in North Carolina. And so he had to flee the country, and he went to Cuba, welcomed him with open arms. Eldridge Cleaver, with all his contradictions, was able to escape responsibility for getting little Bobby Hutton killed on April 6, 1968 in Oakland, and fled and ended up in Cuba before they kicked him out. Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, was able to go to Cuba to escape all the charges against him. And he lived there 3 years working in the Cuban Revolution. A lot of people don't know that. So Assata Shakur was not the first African liberation fighter from the United States who went to Cuba. There's a long history of that because there's a long history of Cuba's socialist revolution fighting in support of the African liberation struggle. And this is also Cuba's Committees in Defense of the Revolution and their organization in the Cuban security apparatus was best suited to defend and protect our sister, Assata. And so finally, let's talk about the significance of Assata's life. And I think it's all summed up in the picture of the young African women in the picture there. They look very young. I see a lot of youth wearing that hoodie Assata taught me. And I've talked to a lot of them. None of them, most of them have never met Assata. They never even went to Cuba, but they're inspired by her example. What example? So she made her physical transition in September 25th, 2025. And when we reflect upon that legacy, the BLA's vision in helping Assata escape achieve the objective that they wanted to achieve in leaps and bounds. The main strength of the capitalist imperialist network is in its ability to shape the narrative of the world we live in. And part of that is their propaganda aimed at revolutionaries that, again, if you stand up against us, you will lose. That lone act of Assata's escape shatters that reactionary propaganda. And it demonstrates that when we are properly organized, we can defeat this system. We can bring this system to our knees. And so if you shed a tear for Assata, you should do that. But you should also take from her life the lesson that she taught us that we can defeat this system. That's a lesson that we need to consistently magnify. And I know it's difficult because there's so much backward propaganda. There's so much of this propaganda around us every day that there's so much wrong with us. There's nothing we can do. Forget all that nonsense. The only thing wrong with us is this backward ass capitalist imperialist system. That is the only thing wrong with us. There is nothing wrong with you other than that. And don't let them tell you that there's anything wrong with you. You're a beautiful human being. The only thing we want you to do is get involved in the struggle to create this better world. That's the only criticism we have of you. We don't care if you drink, you smoke. We don't give a damn about it. You have to do something to deal with this nonsense. We get it. We just want you to do something, make some kind of contribution to change the world we live in. That, everyone, is the message that Assata wanted us to hear. That's what she told me when I had the chance to meet her, and I have never forgot it, as well as all the other people who I've been able to meet who made ultimate sacrifices for our liberation. I always remember everything they told me. And I want you to know that the system of enemies that we're fighting, they understand clearly that that was her message. That's why they tried so hard to get her back. They understood that it was a defeat for them. That's why they put a $2 million bounty on a 70-something-year-old woman. That's why they did that, because they needed to correct that defeat so that they could further demoralize us. Well, they were unsuccessful. Now, the next question, Assata's no longer here. What are you going to do to build on her example? That's the question, you all. And we want to thank you for joining us today. We definitely invite you back next week. Please come back. We have a wonderful program. Dr. Shakur is going to be doing the bulk of the program next week with her expertise talking about the unknown truths about trafficking in Africa. It's a very serious issue, and we want to bring it to the forefront and get it into your conscious mind. So join us next week for the program. The QR code in the upper left hand, the red and white one, you can scan it. Please do that and get information on all of the All African People's Revolutionary Party programs that we sponsor online. And also, you can go to the Forward Ever shop by scanning that QR code. And please do that so you can buy. We have a number of clothing items you can buy that support our revolutionary work with positive revolutionary slogans, pictures, all of that, hoodies, t-shirts, all of that we have. So go there and support that. Hoodcommunist.org is a revolutionary Pan-African blog. Support Hood Communist. And then for those of you who are in the Sacramento area, Northern California, or you know people here, please invite them to come out to our community self-defense classes. We exercise your mind, we exercise your body, we train you how to defend the masses of people intellectually, politically, and physically. So come out. We do it every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. at 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8 p.m. every Thursday. So please invite people. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to www.aaprp-intl for international.org, and you can find out about our virtual events as well as in-person events. We have a calendar there, and you can watch a video. You can learn how you can join. The QR code on the bottom right is for Burkina books. It's also Niger books. It's our APRP work in Niger and Burkina Faso, bringing revolutionary literature to our people there so we can revolutionize the masses of people. So become a monthly sponsor for that. And please either buy my book or tell people about it, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8. Unfortunately, you can only buy it on Amazon, but the good news is 100% of the proceeds go towards the type of anti-fascist work I described when I talked about we were defending people against terrorists who supported Charlie Kirk. This is what I do spend a lot of my life doing, training people on how to do this self-defense work, community defense work. So when you buy the book, you're helping us do this work. Thank you all for joining. Please think about it. Think about Assata's contribution. That's what she would want us to do. And she would also not just want us to think about it, but to act on it. Forward ever, backwards never. Please do something nice for yourself. Enjoy the rest of your day.